welcome to my show. It's called Critical Thought. Right, it's my first time. I'm still finding my way around. I set up the show so I can discuss some news, opinions, politics, what's going on in the world around us. We're going to be looking at local level to national level and even international, global current affairs. I mean, there's a lot going on in the world today. So much going on, in fact, that I've realized a portion of that is actually reported to us by the mass media. Now, I say the mass media as in the mainstream media, the places where we normally go to get our main sources of information, reputable information, like sources from the BBC and ITV and the Daily Mail or the Guardian or wherever people go. These are the mass mainstream media. These are the media that get to us more than any other forms of media. Well, they certainly did until the internet allowed us to get information from many other sources. So today we're going to be talking about a few issues. We're going to be talking about the vaccine, the coronavirus itself, and we're going to be talking about no jab, no job, and we're also going to be looking at a small cafe in Manchester that decided to go against government guidelines and open up for its customers. And you know, I looked at some of the scenes. I've got video footage, exclusive video footage of what actually went on in the cafe, and it really did get blown out of all proportion, and a policeman ended up punching the cafe owner and being really quite violent towards him. Now, you might say, well, we're in the middle of a pandemic, you shouldn't have opened this business, but you know, people are losing their income, people are losing their livelihood. Now, is it fair for the government to say, you must shut your business, we'll give you money? You know, but it's not free money, they're going to have to pay this money back. I mean, there's certainly various grants and things you can get, but they're giving you money to close your shop. You know, they're giving you money to stay home. Stay home. There's a danger here. The virus is going to ravage through the country and kill everybody. We're all going to be dead. I mean, that's the kind of sentiment, that's the kind of feeling we're getting from mainstream sources. Right, anyway, first of all, I've got a few windows open up. I'm new to all this. Hopefully, as we progress, I'll start upgrading the technology, learning how to use it better. We'll have more music and things like that coming into play, but that will be a work in progress just for now. But anyway, let's start. Right, let's look at this. No jab, no job seems to be trending right now. Now, the UK government on this have said they're not going to be making these vaccines mandatory. You know, they said it's wrong to do that. Let me have a quick read. Nearly a year on from the start of the pandemic, many employers and employees will be attracted by the prospect of a workforce that is fully vaccinated against COVID-19, which may take them closer towards a safe return to normality. Now, employers being attracted by the prospect of the workforce that is fully vaccinated against COVID-19. Well, that's PR, isn't it? It's PR. It's you can. Oh, our unique selling point is that all of us are vaccinated. Oh, our business can be trusted and is safe and secure because all of our staff are vaccinated. I mean, that's just public relations. There's no. That's not. Oh, we need to get all our workforce vaccinated because scientifically no. This is PR at its best. You know, so if we can get all our workforce vaccinated and say they've been vaccinated, we can capitalize on that when we sell our products, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, mandatory vaccination is not expected at a national level. So we're not expecting mandatory vaccination. This is government. The government has said we're not expecting mandatory vaccinations at a national level. But now you've got businesses eyeing up the prospect of ensuring that all their staff have been vaccinated. Now, there seems to be problems already with this, that they're going to run into legal difficulties if they try and force their staff that they have already working for them to be vaccinated. But the loophole is they can demand that any new employers that they employ are vaccinated. So, you know, it's discrimination. You won't employ someone unless they've been vaccinated, but you can't sack an employee if they haven't been vaccinated. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. The only sense it makes is that push that back door to try and ensure all their staff have been vaccinated. Anyway, let's have a little look. That's not the way we do things, the Prime Minister said, in this country. Yet, in spite of the government's position, we have seen at least one employer publicly commit to no job policy in recent weeks. The notion of mandatory vaccines has set alarm bells ringing for many. Culture and medical ethics aside, mandatory vaccination is certainly an employment law minefield for a host of reasons. So, as I said, unfair dismissal, you got discrimination, there's all kinds of, human rights, all kinds of legal hotspots there that employers ought to be very careful of before forcing people to do something, put something in their bodies. You know, it's their bodies, it's their right. You know, I'm not anti-vaccine at all. I have questions about the coronavirus vaccines. I mean, there's a dozen in production, and everyone's rushing out to get the first one or two, which haven't undergone vigorous and lengthy trials. There's no long-term safety records available, and they won't be available for many years to come. And the mRNA type vaccines obviously have never been used before in our history. So everyone rushing out to get the first vaccine. Now, I'm not knocking them. If people want to rush out and get a vaccine, that's fine. But in my opinion, you should have a choice of whether you want to get it or not. Hopefully, there will be enough percentage of the population want to go out and get the vaccine. I mean, they were looking at 65 to 70% of the population getting vaccinated. I mean, that's fine. I mean, if 65, 70% want to go ahead, but we must remember, you know, these new vaccines, they skip the animal trials. I mean, you might say, oh, it's cruel to test on animals anyway, but by skipping the animal trials, they've just shifted those trials into the human population. And now we used to have laws and regulations to stop mass testing and not mass testing, stop medical experimenting on large swathes of the population. You know, we used to be protected, but they've cut, because of the COVID-19 emergency laws, they've cut all the red tape, so they're now able to skip parts of the trial. So, reality is, these vaccines are experimental vaccines, and nobody should be made to feel bad or be discriminated against if they don't want to participate at this stage in the trial. Now, if we look, we've got a new strain there, new strain, we've got the Spanish strain, we've got the Kent strain, we've got the South African strain. There's lots of new strains coming, and it's no guarantee that these vaccines will actually work on these new strains. I mean, if we look at Dr. Fauci, what Dr. Fauci has to say, new data shows that COVID-19 vaccines currently on the market may not be as effective in guarding against new, more contagious strains of the coronavirus, giving all the more reason to vaccinate people faster. Now, I don't understand this. We've got a vaccine, a new strain comes along. Oh, the vaccine might not be effective against this new strain. Oh, we'll quickly vaccinate them anyway. Does that make any sense? I mean, if it's not going to be effective with the new strain, then why are we taking this vaccine at this time? I mean, with over a dozen vaccines in development, maybe further down the line, there'll be more vaccines that will work for these different strains. But what we're effectively looking at now is going out and getting a vaccine for the prevalent strain, I think, which is now being replaced by different strains, but we're going for the original strain of the virus. Um, then we're going to have to go later on and get another vaccine for another strain and another vaccine for another strain. I mean, it's in trial. I mean, why? I'd rather wait 12 months and go and get a vaccine that's going to get all these different strains, boom, and you're done. I'm certainly not going to be going every 5 or 6 months or whatever, a jab in the arm every 6 months just because of a new strain. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. A handful of new strains of the coronavirus have emerged overseas and has given scientists some cause for concern. Some variants that have been identified in the United Kingdom, South Africa, Brazil appear to be more transmissible than previous strains, but not necessarily more deadly. Now let's just look at that again. More transmissible than previous strains, but not necessarily more deadly. I mean, what does that actually mean? Well, I remember when the new strain was discovered before Christmas. They'd actually known about it for a couple of months, and it was just a cause for concern. So right before Christmas, right, we need a nationwide lockdown now, right over Christmas and the festive period, because there's a concerning new strain. But at the time, the new strain didn't show any more deadliness towards it, but it was more contagious. Now, for anybody that's done any research on vaccines, normally, if a strain mutates into a faster spreading strain, they very often become much weaker. Because I was looking at the hospitalization data at the time of the new strain, and they were saying that the new strain wasn't leading to any further hospitalization. But if you had the equivalent, if the new strain was equivalent or greater than the deadliness of the original strain and was 70% more contagious, suddenly, hospital admissions, deaths, everything on top of that would have racked up 70% quicker. And that just wasn't the case. It wasn't happening. The 70% faster transmitting wasn't correlated and adding on all these extra deaths and all these extra hospitalization. And when we talk about hospitalization, yeah, we've got Mark Drakeford on one article, or at some time, was saying there's now 3,000 people in hospital with the coronavirus. But what you've got to remember, there's no breakdown to that. How many people were being hospitalized because they had the coronavirus? How many people went to hospital with other conditions, but because they're now tested on the way into hospital, they tested positive, but they weren't displaying any symptoms. So how many asymptomatic cases are there in hospital? How many of those 3,000 patients were critical and sick? And how many were in ICU? There was no breakdown. So 3,000 people in hospital because of coronavirus in Wales at that time. It must be, it's a different number now, but 3,000 of those people weren't dying in hospital with coronavirus. It was probably a very small percentage of that. Even the majority of those with the coronavirus in hospital wouldn't even have any symptoms and weren't even there because of the coronavirus. They were there for other conditions. So it's really misleading to say there's 3,000 people in hospital with coronavirus and growing. No, there's 3,000 people in hospital and they have tested positive. Now, I'm not diminishing or belittling the seriousness of the virus. I mean, my brother has had it, 44, fit and healthy. He ended up recently very sick in hospital with pneumonia and coronavirus. Now, I will mention that there are cases of bacterial pneumonia being detected, and a lot of that bacterial pneumonia It's caused by excessive wearing of masks, and it's not being reported. Wearing a mask all the time, it's not being reported that these people are being hospitalised. So, I mean, it's a bit dubious. I'm not that he was very, very ill. I'm very glad that he's feeling better now and he's gone home. But a fit and healthy 44-year-old in hospital with pneumonia, no underlying health condition, tested positive for coronavirus. Oh, it must be the coronavirus. I mean, has anyone ever had pneumonia? I mean, it's not nice at all. Vaccinated people are not exempt from self-isolation requirements and may still transmit the virus to others. Let me just read that again. Vaccinated people are not exempt from self-isolation requirements and may still transmit the virus to others. What does that tell you? So you have the vaccine, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're vaccinated. But you can still transmit the virus to others. Vaccinated people are not exempt from self-isolation requirements and may still transmit the virus to others. If we look, private vaccinations are not readily available yet, and for many people, vaccination is not imminent. In light of this, mandatory vaccinations appear to be a more knee-jerk reaction and lead employers into uncharted waters from a legal perspective. And absolutely, so they should. I mean, let's not be hasty here. Let's have a look at what's going on around us. I mean, we've got the first vaccine with the Pfizer vaccine. Then you've got the Moderna vaccine, and now we've got the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine, which apparently now doesn't work, or they don't think it works, or it doesn't work for the new strain, and it might work for that strain, but not this strain. So you know, it's important to find out. I mean, my mum has had coronavirus. My mum had a partner. It was, you know, very worrying for them, but they weren't hospitalized. They're 70, 75 respectively, and they didn't end up in hospital. So they were very ill. I'm not doubting that at all. But 70 and 75, you know, Harry's got underlying health conditions and absolutely fine. They're fine now. Absolutely fine. They've recovered. And that's a good thing. And what we're finding is the majority of people are recovering. So my brother, my mum and a partner, my auntie and uncle have had it, and they were hospitalised, and my uncle was even put in ICU. It was a very worrying time, but they recovered. They're okay. So far, I don't know anyone that's died from the virus itself in my family circle and things like that. But anyway, let's talk about the Maya. That's my dog. Sorry, she's interrupted my feed. Anyway, mass testing. Mass testing is inaccurate and gives false sense of security, a minister admits. But this is the British Medical Journal. They will come back to this. Look at this. Look, people queuing up. This was Mercer. Well, mass community testing be offered across Wales, and we're talking 16th of January. Now, there was talks, like in Mercer, they'd have a walk-in testing site. You could walk in with absolutely no symptoms whatsoever and just get yourself a test. And if you test positive, you go home and self-isolate. If you're negative, you carry on about your day. But these people are not sick. They're not sick. If you were sick, you'd have to go to another testing site. And they were talking of setting up 15 of these mass testing sites across Wales to get everybody mass tested to control the spread of the virus. But let's have a look through. People queued around the side of a leisure centre to be mass tested in COVID when Merthyr Tydfil was considered a hotspot in November. I think we remember that if we live in Wales, with the army drafted in. Minister Health, UK Health Secretary Matt Hancock. Now we've all got our opinion on Mr. Hancock. Has credited this method of lateral flow testing for asymptomatic people with lowering case rates in Liverpool, another COVID hotspot. But this is disputed, mind. Now let me get into this. He has since announced that these regular rapid tests would be used in communities across England. What's the date of this article? This article was 16th of January. So, but are they likely to be rolled out across Wales? We'll see. We've got asymptomatic South Wales police officers face tests. So at the minute they're testing fit and healthy people, police officers even, regularly with lateral flow tests to ensure they've not got the virus and they can carry on going to work. NHS rapid test used defended amid accuracy concerns. Now there's many concerns about the accuracy of these tests. There's a very high false positive rate, and there's also a very high false negative rate. What does that mean? It means you can test positive for the coronavirus even if you haven't got it. You can test negative for the coronavirus even if you have. I mean, very good form of testing there, which doesn't make much sense. Now, I will come on a bit more about mass testing, but it is a quick test for coronavirus symptoms and returns the result in about 30 minutes. This means though, and you might think that's convenient, oh, quick test, 30 minutes, right, I'm clear, off we go. But this means those who have been in close contact with someone who has tested positive will not have to self-isolate if their test comes back negative. Now this all seems convenient for the moment, but where is that leading? Instead of having to self-isolate, they could remain at work or in the classroom. They could remain at work or in the classroom. Now we're talking teachers here. We're talking, oh, I feel a bit wobbly this morning, I'll just take a test and I can remain in the classroom. Or, oh, a child's gone home sick, you might have coronavirus. Oh, I'll just give myself a quick test. Oh, everything's fine. Sounds a bit dubious to me. So instead of having to self-isolate, they could remain at work or in the classroom if they tested negative with a lateral flow test each morning. Every morning. Every morning. Take the test every morning. Now, I remember Boris Johnson talking about this. Oh, we're looking at new technology, which isn't available yet, but could be here in the future, where we could take a test and we could have 24 hours of freedom. 24 hours of freedom. We all get freedom for 24 hours. It's a freedom path. Take your test, freedom. Now, with the alarming number of high false positive rates and false negative rates, I mean, this test sounds great. Oh, you take yourself in the morning. Oh, I'm positive. Oh, I'll have to stay home today and check again tomorrow. Or do I have to isolate for 10 days because I tested positive, even though it may be a false positive? Or, oh, I tested negative. I'm going out for 24 hours, even though you're positive. You're going out spreading it all about for 24 hours. They're not accurate. These tests are not accurate. How effective are the tests? Let's have a look. An article in the British Medical Journal. Now, this is not any sort of ragtag newspaper. This is a leading medical journal, probably one of the most reputable medical journals in the world, the British Medical Journal. These are industry leaders, medical leaders and professionals. So what the British Medical Journal say, I mean, that is a reputable source, and we should be listening to these. And so, I mean, that's an important point to make. They're not just quoting some, palm off Facebook. This is actually a reputable, hundreds of years old medical journal. So, an article in the British Medical Journal raised concerns about the effect of rapid testing in Liverpool, where a pilot scheme was carried out. Now you remember that the army rolled in And then suddenly they're mass testing in Liverpool, knocking door to door. Oh, let's go around door to door and offer people a test. The lateral flow tests, which do not require processing in a laboratory. So these lateral flow, these quick tests, they're different to the PCR test. 30-minute turnaround. Take a swab, dip it in the solution, then it changes colour. Perhaps that colour change will tell you whether you're positive or negative. But anyway, the lateral flow tests, which do not require processing in a laboratory, were reported to have missed half of all cases. Just read that again. I'm just going to highlight that bit. Just going to stop there. The lateral flow tests, which do not require processing in a laboratory, were reported to have missed half of all cases. Well, what does that mean? It means, well, half of the people they tested well, all the people that tested positive, you could double that, because 50% of those were missed. So they might have highly inaccurate. And a third of those with a high viral load who are likely to be most infectious. So these lateral flow tests missed a third of those with high viral loads who are likely to be most infectious. So, what do we know about viral load? I mean, high viral load, people are usually very sick. But, and they're spreading germs, they're coughing and spluttering and sneezing, and normally, they're rough, and they have a high viral load. Now, can you have a high viral load of coronavirus and have no symptoms? That is the question. I mean, still to this day, according to the World Health Organization, there is no lab confirmed evidence to support asymptomatic transmission. Now, a lot of these rules that are coming into play, somewhat arbitrary in cases, are being implemented without actual evidence for their implementation. Now, the WHO say asymptomatic transmission is very unlikely and extremely rare, although they have had reports of asymptomatic transmission where the source of infection couldn't be traced back to, with the track and trace and trying to trace your contact. But that is not evidence of asymptomatic transmission. That's just simply that's just not evidence of asymptomatic transmission. I mean, to prove asymptomatic transmission is taking place, it would have to be confirmed in a lab, and it still hasn't to this day. Anyway, Angela Raffle, a consultant in public health at the University of Bristol Medical School, also said increasing lateral flow tests was very worrying. It is very worrying. It is. Because if people, it's going to miss half the cases and it's going to put false positives on the other half of the cases, and it's really not a good way of doing things. And if everything swings on taking this test every morning, anyway, and warned the benefits of finding symptomless cases will be outweighed by the many more infectious cases that are missed by these tests. But she's saying they're useless. There's no point. We're increasing this lateral flow testing over speed. We can take a test and carry on for the day. Freedom pass. But it's very worrying to this lady from the University of Bristol. She's not a Karen on Facebook, she's from a university. However, Susan Hopkins, Chief Medical Advisor to the NHS Test and Trace in England. Now, I don't know Susan Hopkins. Chief Medical Advisor to NHS Test and Trace. Now, said the lateral flow test could identify many cases of infection in people without symptoms. people without symptoms. Those with no symptoms. I mean, there's no proof, no evidence that without symptoms, you could be spreading all this virus about. There's no proof. You've got to be sick, like most viruses. While she admitted there were false negatives, now she admitted there's false negatives, but what does that mean? It means there's also false positives. You can't say, oh, there's a high number of false negatives, but no false positive. No, it seems to be inaccurate on both ends of the spectrum. And the method has limitations. Of course it has limitations. Dr. Hopkins said its use was a game changer. Well, absolutely. Anyway, where they've been piloted in Wales, you know, we're going back to the British Medical Journal now. British Medical Journal, which is here. Let's have a look. COVID-19. Mass testing is inaccurate and gives false sense of security, Minister admits. Now, the British Medical Journal, I told you about this. This was published on the 18th of December. And what are we doing? Oh, mass testing is inaccurate and gives false sense of security. So what do we do with this information from this reputable source? What do the reputable source? What do the government do? What do the Welsh ministers do? They increase testing. Mass testing is inaccurate and gives false sense of security, Minister admits. So what do we do? Increase testing. It makes no sense. It doesn't make any sense. Mass testing of people without COVID-19 symptoms is not an accurate way of screening the general population. A senior figure at the Department of Health and Social Care has said in a letter seen by the British Medical Journal. The comments were made by James Bethell, one of England's health ministers, in response to a letter from an MP raising concerns about blanket polymerase chain reaction PCR testing on behalf of a consultant. Let's have a look. In a letter, swab testing people with no symptoms is not an accurate way of screening the general population, as there is a risk of giving false reassurance, he added. Widespread asymptomatic testing could undermine the value of testing. Well, what does that mean? If people are sick, get them tested. If you're not sick, don't get tested. That's how it was in the beginning. Why have we changed now to this mass testing of all people, regardless of whether they are unwell or not? That doesn't make any sense either. It would make sense if we had evidence to support asymptomatic transmission is occurring in the communities. Now, we're going to cover lots of topics in my news shows. This is just one of them. See, rather only people with COVID-19 symptoms should get tested. Only. So we've got all these people in hospital tested positive. Only people with symptoms should get tested. So what do? Go to hospital. You've got to have a test. Got to have a test. We need to know if you've got the virus. We need to know if you can spread it around the hospital. Now, without any evidence for asymptomatic transmission. So they're going into hospital for a broken ankle. They're being tested for COVID-19. They're tested positive for COVID-19. They're classed as a COVID-19 case in hospital. They're not sick. They're not unwell. They've got a broken ankle. But they've tested positive. And this is happening to everyone that goes into hospital. But let's have a look right here. Widespread asymptomatic testing could undermine the value of testing, and there is a risk of giving misleading results. Rather, only people with COVID-19 should get tested. So not everyone that walks into hospital should be tested. 3,000 people in hospital that have been tested positive, 100 of them could be sick with symptoms, but that information is not getting to us. through mainstream mass media sources. So citizen journalists like me and other people need to engage in discussions about this between ourselves, because we're not getting the information we need, or we are getting the information we need, but it's not being reported to us in a fair and honest way, and being aware of how much power and influence the media have been able to accumulate. I don't know how you've allowed them to. I'm very aware of how they like to steer narratives towards desired outcomes.